Hello, I'm Hank Berkowitz, president of HB Publishing and Marketing Company. Our topic today is social media for business marketers. Joining me are Rick Telberg, president of Bay Street Group Research, and Steve Rappaport, Knowledge Solutions Director for the Advertising Research Foundation. To download more podcasts like these for business-to-business marketers, visit www.hbpubdev.com. I don't think anyone's going to disagree that social media is a very hot area for business marketers right now. Facebook recently passed Google as the #1 site for weekly traffic. Twitter's attracting more than 20 million unique visitors a month. LinkedIn has over 65 million visitors in 200 countries around the world, and even Harvard and London business schools are adding social networking to their core curriculum. Gentlemen, do you find most organizations you deal with really have a social media strategy, or are they just sort of winging it because they feel they have to and they feel they need to?
Well, it's both, Hank. You know, there's a number of companies that really do have a very strong social media strategy, and like for example, Dell Computer has real, one of the sort of poster children for how to use social media, right? But Ford, Ford has a social media department headed up by somebody, Kodak, right? And Best Buy, so some companies have really looked at it and said, we're going to make this part of the way that we do our business, right? But then there's other companies that have said, we have to get involved in this somehow. We need to have a social media strategy. And those are the companies that are really flailing around. And but we can talk about that a little bit more, but that's really how it shapes up. But in terms of sort of an 80-20 rule, it's more 20% maybe have a decent approach to it, and 80 are still trying to figure it out.
So let's hope that we can at least help the 20, that at least have a directional clue. Yeah. And Rick, what are you seeing from where you are in the professional space?
In the professional services space, we're seeing strategies all over the map. We're seeing companies like Intuit, for instance, using social media as a way to enhance customer service and actually reduce the cost by 90% last tax season. Among accounting firms, Ernst & Young and KPMG are very active in social spaces for recruiting purposes. They're finding that it's a great way to establish a reputation and a connection with the next generation of recruits. And then there's a lot of firms and companies that are still trying to figure it out. That in itself is a strategy, and they will figure it out.
Okay, let's hit the pause button for just a second. I mean, we're talking about social media, Web 2.0, these terms used interchangeably. I mean, is Facebook really the same as Twitter? Is Twitter the same as LinkedIn? Is LinkedIn the same as Foursquare? Are blogs is it all in the same, or is each of these tools and applications have their own unique identity and own unique purpose?
That's it. They do. They tend to get lumped together as social media. Social media itself is a term that doesn't really mean much, because it sets up an expectation that it's like traditional or analog media, a place where you put advertising. And in fact, what you've described and what these services do is they provide different ways for people to communicate and share. And if we think about it as social communication, right, then that begins to suggest other ways of thinking about what to do. Now, having said all of that, some companies, I was just meeting, I can't say who, I was just meeting with a large healthcare company, and they did a study, and what they found was that their customers use the different services differently, right? So they use Facebook different than they use Twitter, and they use those different than they use blogs and things. And then what they also did is they looked to see, right, how do people participate, right, in these different media? And it turns out that somebody can be a very active contributor, in one place like Facebook, and just be kind of a reader, on blogs. So what they're looking to do now is to really understand the behavior that their customers adopt regarding each of these communications technologies, and then devising strategies to really maximize their branding and advertising.
So what you're saying, Steve, it sounds like is that people have different personalities that they use and utilize to promote themselves or advance their initiative in different ways on the web.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And going back to the professional space, I'm even aware of a professional society in the state of Texas, fairly large one, that is actually providing Facebook, Twitter, and social media counseling to their members, and one of the main initiatives is to separate their business and personal lives with respect to how they use Facebook and other forms of social media.
That's in fact what's happening. Among the professions, between lawyers and accountants and engineers, we see them beginning to understand the different purposes of these different tools, using LinkedIn for straight business purposes and Facebook for keeping in touch with a more social friend network, and Twitter for more like updates to a larger audience. The learning curve is rising rapidly. The last data that we found at Bay Street Group Research is that 54% of rank and file accountants are on LinkedIn. 48% of these accountants are on Facebook already. Their favorite place is Facebook. They like to, quote unquote, hang out at Facebook when we ask. That's what they do for fun. Part of it is business. But when they want business only, they go to LinkedIn, and they're still trying to figure out Twitter.
Yeah, that's interesting, because even social media e-newsletter, which you would think would be the cutting edge early adopters, 42% of their readers, which would be in the know, said their own companies are just jumping on the Web 2.0 bandwagon because they feel they have to, and they're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, they have it in industries like law and accounting and things. One of the reasons why the adoption has been somewhat slow is because they're regulated industries, and so they have to think through all of the ramifications. For example, in pharmaceuticals, one of the things that they have to report if they find it is an adverse event or an adverse reaction. And so there's all sorts of reporting and legal liability and regulatory concerns that, that say a non-regulated business would have.
I was talking to another association director recently, and they're in a very hazardous, dangerous industry. They allow Twittering from their conferences. They allow Facebook postings from their conferences, but they will not acknowledge or permit that on their own websites. It's an interesting demarcation.
Among professionals, what we're finding also is that the smallest firms or the solo practitioners are some of the most aggressive users of social media, partly because it's easy and cheap for them, and partly because of the compliance issues. They can deal with the compliance issues without having to deal with staff manuals and a lot of oversight and supervision. So social media has, like a lot of digital media, has been a boon to the smallest operators.
I was at a conference last week. It was really interesting. Some of the smaller organizations, like you said, they're so excited about having a really powerful, low-cost, global platform to get their voice out, but it's this balance between impact and control. The more impact you have, the less control you have. The more control you have, the less impact you have. So there's this constant balance between the compliance and legal people and what the marketing and PR people want to do to advance the organization.
Yeah. No, I was thinking, you're really raising an important point, which is that it's one thing to use these technologies and tools, but it's another to really have a strategy for using them, right? Because even for the small companies, right, the questions that they really need to ask themselves is, how do I really use this to get our message out? How do I use it to really portray what our company is and our values and what it's about, what we think is important, and really create a personality. So it's not just using the tools, right? But it's really being able to convey a sense of one's firm, right? And a reason why people should engage with them, right? And oftentimes that's where I don't see enough thinking.
Okay, so let's bring us back into the real world where the rubber meets the road. I mean, from a B2B perspective, is it really possible to integrate social media into the sales funnel right now and to support lead generation, transaction, and other things that look and sound and smell like actual sales?
The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Social media.
We have a purpose to exist.
Social media is being used to produce sales at every step of the sales cycle. Among small professional services firms, I can tell you that a number of them say they have gotten new clients from appearing and engaging people with questions and comments on places like Facebook and Twitter. Among larger firms, they're establishing thought leadership in places like LinkedIn and gathering people into seminars for selling purposes. At all stages of the sales cycle, operators are finding ways to make a connection and maintain a connection.
Yeah, that's really key, is maintaining the connection. Because you can get a lot of traffic and get people to visit, but unless there's really a reason for them to stay engaged with you, they'll leave, or the strength of that connection is really quite low, and it's not going to really be predictive of anything. So, so you're absolutely right about that.
So, I mean, you're both sort of touched upon the sales cycle, the purchase consideration phase. A lot of our clients, a lot of the organization you deal with, it's not just a single meeting, here's the contract. It's a long, drawn-out sales cycle. You need a lot of buy-in. I mean, where in the purchase decision cycle do you think social media is best? Is it the initial brand awareness? Is it the further learn phase? Is it the final meet and greet? Is it all of the above?
Yeah, it's probably all of the above, but I think that where it has the most value is in the further learning, right, and consideration. It really helps us rethink what advertising does and how it should work, right? Because for years and years and years, for decades, maybe even centuries, the role of advertising was seen as being primarily educational, right? To teach people about a product, right? So a lot of the research that was done is, do you remember this? Are you aware of it? Do you know this attribute? Well, by the time somebody's really involved in social media, they've already done a lot of that work, right? So they're knowledgeable. So now the game begins to be, or changes to be, how can I help influence a decision, right? How can I help shape choice, right? Which is very different from saying, spit back, the three benefits or the three attributes. But to help them really make decisions about alternatives, that's where social media can have a lot of power, right? Because it's not just the company or the brand talking, it's also the community of people who are involved and engaged, right? So I think that the real impact of social media, right, can be there, and also, as we were talking about, also in the sort of retention or the continual engagement with the brand, right? Because generally the stronger the relationship, right, it means that the brand and the customer will understand each other better over time, and they can both kind of calibrate themselves. So I think it's really at the latter stages where it can have the biggest hit.
Absolutely right. What we're learning with social media is that all marketing is content marketing. Yeah. All marketing is educational, and just as it's transitioned, the initial stages of marketing and advertising have transitioned from initial education to using social media to be decision support, decision reinforcement, right, so that people feel comfortable making the decision they might want to make anyway. And in an organization where there are multiple decision makers, mm-hmm, social media is proving very effective in providing the evidence that the buying champion needs to bring to the other buying influencers.
Right. So what we're saying, if we could wrap it up, is that social media is leveling the playing field. It's giving a broad global voice to everyone who has an opinion that matters. Social media is measurable. Social media can be very dangerous, however. If not used, it can be an enormous drain of time and energy resources in an organization. It can launch a lot of misguided marketing direction. So before plunging in, you need to have your strategy and your goals in place. And if you can't do it in-house, you need to find outside experts who you can trust, who have a proven track record, who can understand the real goals and objectives of your organization to make it work.
I want to say one more thing about it being dangerous. The most dangerous thing about social media is ignoring it.
Rick and Steve, thank you so much for joining us. Things are changing so fast and so furiously. We're going to need to have you back real soon to explain it.
Thanks.
We'd be happy to come back.
And if you'd like to see more podcasts specifically for business-to-business marketers, again, visit our website at www.hbpubdev.com.